In the summer of 1944, one American submarine changed the course of the Pacific War. Commander Samuel Dealey and his crew aboard USS Harder hunted Japanese destroyers with a ferocity no one had seen before. In just 12 days, they sank 4 destroyers and crippled a 5th, forcing Japan's carrier fleet to flee early and stumble into one of the most decisive battles in naval history, the Battle of the Philippine Sea. That early retreat cost Japan hundreds of aircraft, 3 carriers, and the strength of its naval air force. Harder's daring attacks helped turn the tide of war, proving that submarines could outfight even the fastest surface hunters. But the same courage that brought victory also carried a price. 2 months later, Harder was ambushed off Luzon, trapped by Japanese escorts and destroyed by depth charges. All 79 men aboard were lost. Still, their legacy lived on. Dealey's aggressive down-the-throat tactics revolutionized submarine warfare, inspiring a generation of captains and rewriting the Navy's combat doctrine. 80 years later, Harder's wreck was finally found, silent but undefeated, resting deep beneath the South China Sea, a steel memorial to the men who changed history and paid the ultimate price. At 06:47 on June 6, 1944, Commander Samuel Dealey peered out from the tight confines of USS Harder's conning tower, watching 3 Japanese destroyers cut across the moonlit sea off Tawi Tawi as they tracked his submarine with lethal accuracy. He was 37 years old on his 5th war patrol, credited with sinking 18 enemy vessels. The Imperial Japanese Navy had sent Minisuki, Hayanami, and Tanakas with orders to eliminate the American sub that had been disrupting their supply routes for 3 weeks. Until April 1944, U.S. submariners generally avoided engaging Japanese destroyers. A destroyer could make 35 knots on the surface. A submerged submarine could only manage about 9. From December 1941 to March 1944, Japanese destroyers had sunk 14 American submarines. No American submarine had ever sunk a Japanese destroyer while both were actively fighting, until Commander Dealey changed that on April 13th. When the destroyer Ikazuchi charged Harder at full speed, most officers expected him to dive and run. Instead, he ordered flank speed and steered straight for the attacker. At 900 yards, Harder launched a 4-torpedo spread. 2 found their mark amidships. The destroyer exploded and sank in 5 minutes. Dealey's radio report, expended 4 torpedoes and 1 destroyer, became legendary across the Pacific Submarine Force. Admiral Suimu Toyota, Commander-in-Chief of the Japanese Combined Fleet, did not take it lightly. Between January and May 1944, Japan had lost 23 destroyers. Operation Ago, the plan to strike the American invasion fleet at the Philippines, depended on exact timing and coordination. Losing destroyers to submarine ambushes threw those plans into chaos. By late May, Toyota massed the mobile fleet at Tawi Tawi anchorage, 4 battleships including Yamato, 9 carriers, 15 cruisers and 28 destroyers, the largest concentration of Japanese naval firepower since Midway. American codebreakers intercepted hints of the movement. Admiral Charles Lockwood ordered Harder to patrol around Tawi Tawi and strike targets of opportunity. For 9 days, Harder slipped through the patrols undetected. Then at 0300 on June 6th, a Japanese patrol plane sighted Harder's periscope, wake 15 miles north of Tawi Tawi. 3 destroyers were vectored in immediately. If you want to see how Dealey's aggressive tactics fared against 3 destroyers, hunting him at once, please hit like and subscribe so we can bring more forgotten submarine stories to light. Back to the fight. Commander Dealey watched the lead destroyer through his periscope. Minizuki, 250 tons with 4 5-inch guns, closing rapidly and zigzagging to foil torpedoes. 2 other destroyers fanned out in a search pattern, tightening a box toward a kill zone. Dealey swung Harder's bow directly at Minizuki. Range 100 yards. Time to collision 96 seconds. Everyone in the conning tower knew what down the throat meant. Fire torpedoes straight at an attacker's bow and then submerge under her keel. If the torpedoes missed, the destroyer would drop depth charges on your location. If you submerged too late, she might ram you. At 750 yards, Harder fired 3 torpedoes, drop her to 300 feet. Harder's bow fell at a 30-degree angle. 40 seconds after firing, 2 violent explosions jarred the boat so hard, light fixtures smashed. A third blast lifted Harder's stern 6 feet before it slammed back down. Day came up to periscope depth. Where Minizuki had been there was only wreckage and an oil slick. The destroyer had split and was sinking. The other two destroyers sped away, scattering depth charges as they went. Admiral Toyota learned of the loss at 0900 and ordered 6 more destroyers to hunt the submarine. By noon, Japanese patrol planes were sweeping the area every 20 minutes, but Day wasn't done. On June 7th at 0230, Harder surfaced to recharge batteries under a moonless, heavily clouded sky. At 0312, radar showed a single contact bearing EO-95, range 8,000 yards, closing fast at 28 knots, clearly a destroyer. Hayanami, about 700 tons, had been searching for U.S. subs since 0100. Her captain, Commander Hideo Kuboki, had orders to return to base at 0300 and was exhausted. Nobody expected a surfaced American sub to attack at night. Day ordered flank speed. Harder's diesels pushed her to 21 knots as he closed deliberately to get inside the destroyer's radar detection. At 4,000 yards, Hayanami's radar operator picked up a small, fast contact. At 3,000 yards, Kuboki realized the mistake and ordered full speed and a turn to ram, but it was too late. At 2,300 yards, D fired 4 torpedoes. 2 struck Hayanami's starboard aft, blowing the stern off. The destroyer rolled 90 degrees, her screws still turning as she sank stern first. Kuboki and 147 crewmen were lost before they hit the surface. Japanese aircraft would be overhead within minutes. 2 destroyers in 24 hours. Japan threw everything at finding the attacker. Admiral Toyota was livid and pulled 8 destroyers from convoy escort to form hunter-killer groups tasked solely with finding and destroying the submarine near Tawi Tawi. Every destroyer captain was ordered. Maximal aggression, no retreat, kill that sub. On June 8th, Day headed Harder south toward Sabutu Passage, the narrow channel between Tawi Tawi and Borneo, where Japanese destroyers patrolled constantly. He wanted to see how many more he could sink before they adapted. At 1400, a lookout spotted 2 destroyers steaming in formation, Tanaka's and an unidentified escort, making about 25 knots on a standard search pattern. Day watched them for 90 minutes. They zigzagged predictably, altering course every 8 minutes, which gave perhaps 30 seconds after each turn to set up a shot. He positioned Harder in their path and waited. At 1630, Tanaka's turned toward Harder's position, range 3,000, then 2,500, 2,000, 3,500. At 1,200 yards, he launched 4 torpedoes spaced 17 seconds apart. The first missed. The second hit near the bridge. The third detonated the forward magazine. The blast was so huge, Harder's crew heard it through the hull despite sealed hatches. Tanaka's bow separated, and both sections sank within 3 minutes. The escort immediately charged and dropped depth charges as she closed. Day took Harder deep to 400 feet. The depth charges detonated overhead, shaking the boat but causing no crippling damage. After 40 minutes, the destroyer gave up and withdrew. 3 destroyers in 3 days. Admiral Toyota was near a breaking point. He was on the verge of making a decision that would alter the course of the Battle of the Philippine Sea, but Day still had 1 more destroyer to find, and this time he planned to do it in daylight with 2 enemy destroyers watching. On June 9th at 0500, Harder rose to periscope depth 12 miles southwest of Tawi Tawi. Dead ahead, 4 Japanese destroyers steamed in a line abreast search, sonar pinging so loudly, Harder's sound operator could hear it without headphones. Day had 8 torpedoes left. With 4 destroyers before him, he might manage only 2 attacks before being overwhelmed. He scrutinized their formation. The lead destroyer zigzagged aggressively, while the second held a steady course, his chosen target. At 062, the second destroyer turned straight toward Harder, range 4,000, then 3,000, 2,500. At 1,800 yards, he fired 3 torpedoes. All 3 struck the port side within 5 seconds. Detonating so violently, debris flew 300 feet into the air. The target rolled and sank in 90 seconds. The remaining 3 destroyers converged, and Harder dove to 500 feet as depth charges began to burst overhead, 23 in the first 10 minutes. The lights failed and emergency lighting came on. Hull plates groaned under pressure, and a pipe burst in the forward torpedo room, spraying seawater. The crew worked silently to repair damage, while depth charges continued to explode around them. After 2 hours, the destroyers withdrew, and Day came back to periscope depth. The enemy ships were gone. 4 Japanese warships sunk in 4 days. Day wasn't celebrating. He was counting fuel. Harder had burned about 60% of her diesel and had perhaps 3 days steaming before she'd need to withdraw to Fremantle. At 1400 on June 9th, Admiral Jizaburo Ozawa, commander of the Japanese mobile fleet at Tawi Tawi, received reports of the attacks, 4 destroyers lost to 1 submarine, and realized the anchorage was exposed if an American sub could penetrate so easily. He sent an urgent message to Admiral Toyota. The mobile fleet had to leave Tawi Tawi at once. Toyota agreed. Operation Ago was supposed to intercept the American invasion force near the Marianas, starting June 15th. Departing 6 days early meant carriers would steam without proper reconnaissance. Destroyers would be scattered across patrol zones and supply lines wouldn't be in place. Yet remaining at Tawi Tawi while an American submarine hunted his destroyers was suicidal. At 0800 on June 10th, the Japanese mobile fleet weighed anchor, 4 battleships, 9 carriers, 15 cruisers and 24 destroyers, heading northeast into the Philippine Sea. American codebreakers intercepted the movement within hours, and Admiral Raymond Spruance, commander of the 5th Fleet, altered his battle plans accordingly. The fleet's early exit bought the American carriers an extra day to take up positions that would matter in the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Day had no idea any of that was unfolding. On June 10th at 16:30, he sighted 2 more destroyers patrolling north of Cebutu Passage, moving fast in an aggressive search pattern. With only 5 torpedoes left, just enough for 1 more strike, he let loose 3 at the lead ship at 17:15. 1 hit near the bow and slowed the destroyer, but did not send her to the bottom. The second escort immediately turned hard for Harder's location. Day fired his remaining 2 torpedoes. Both missed. Now unarmed and facing a Japanese destroyer closing at 32 knots, he ordered an emergency dive. Harder's planes bit hard, and the boat plunged at maximum angle, 300 feet, 400, 500. The destroyer steamed directly overhead, her screws churning so loudly the crew could hear them through the hull. Then she circled back. Day knew the routine. Multiple passes, depth charges dropped on each run, until the sub either surfaced or was crushed. With no torpedoes left, his only hope was endurance. Outweight the depth charge loadout. The first pattern came at 17:23. 6 charges detonated in tight brackets around Harder, rolling her 15 degrees to starboard and shattering light bulbs as men grabbed handholds. 2 minutes later, a second pattern exploded even closer. The stern slammed down and came up again, cork insulation raining from overhead, and a hydraulic line bursting in the control room. For 90 minutes the escort hunted, unloading 42 depth charges. Most detonated too shallow or too distant to be fatal, but 3 were close enough to crack gauge glass and open small leaks. Day kept Harder at 500 feet, crawling at 2 knots, making as little noise as possible. At 19 miles the destroyer finally broke off, her depth charges spent. Day waited an hour more before surfacing into an empty ocean of darkness and the steady thrum of diesels recharging batteries. Harder limped south toward Fremantle at 8 knots to conserve fuel and arrived on June 26th after a 17-day patrol. Admiral Charles Lockwood was at the pier when she tied up. He had been reading intercepted patrol reports. 5 destroyers engaged, 4 sunk, 1 damaged. In 12 days, Harder had carried out the most successful anti-destroyer patrol in submarine history. Lockwood presented Dee the Navy Cross on the spot, then asked the question every sub-skipper dreads, "Can you do it again?" Day's answer was instant. "Give me torpedoes and I'll sink 10. Harder spent July in Fremantle, undergoing repairs, resupply and training, as Dee drilled fresh hands in the down-the-throat method. By late July, commanders across the Pacific had absorbed Harder's patrol reports and the tactics spread. From June through August 1944, American submarines sank 14 Japanese destroyers, using variants of DI's aggressive plan. On August 5th, Harder sailed from Fremantle on her 6th war patrol as part of a 3-boat wolf pack with USS Harder and USS Hake under DI's command. Their assignment was to patrol west of Luzon and intercept Japanese shipping bound for the Philippines. The patrol opened well. On August 21st, the Wolfpack struck a 16-ship convoy off Palawan Bay and in a coordinated strike sank 4 cargo vessels totaling 22,000 tons. On August 22nd, Harder and Hado engaged 3 coastal defense ships off Batangas. All three went down. Harder was credited with 2 frigates, Matsuo and Hibui. By August 23rd, Harder had exhausted her torpedoes and fell back, leaving Harder and Hake operating together off Dassault Bay on Luzon's western shore. Japanese intelligence had tracked the Wolfpack's activities and dispatched a specialist response. At 04:53 on August 24th, USS Hake lay submerged 4 miles off Herman Island and could see Harder surfaced about 4,500 yards to the south. Both boats were preparing to finish off a destroyer. Harder had crippled the day before when Hake's sonar operator heard a chilling echo, contacts closing fast. 2 Japanese escorts, CD-22 and minesweeper PB-102, were steaming at 18 knots conducting an active search. They had been hunting U.S. submarines for 3 days, and Japanese signals intelligence had intercepted radio traffic from Harder. Hake and Harder during the Palawan Bay action, giving away the Wolfpack's general location. Hake's captain ordered deep and silent and watched through the periscope as the 2 escorts closed on Harder. At 05:20, Hake's radio operator tried to warn Harder. There was no reply. Either Harder's radio was off or she was already preparing to dive. At 05:30, Harder executed a crash dive with the enemy under 2,000 yards. Day had only just seen them. He pushed flank speed and the steepest dive angle the boat could take. Harder sank at a 35 degrees angle with diesels running and left a massive bubble trail that marked her position. CD-22's sonar gained a perfect contact at about 1,200 yards and estimated depth near 200 feet. The escort captain ordered an immediate depth charge attack. At 05:47, CD-22 made the first pass and dropped a full pattern set for 250 feet. The explosions bracketed Harder. At least 3 detonated within 50 feet of her hull. The pressure hull cracked near the after torpedo room and seawater rushed in under tremendous force. The stern flooded completely within 90 seconds, and the bow rose as the after compartments dragged the boat down. Day ordered all ballast blown and an emergency surface. Compressed air fought the flooding, but there was too much water in the stern. Harder could not surface. At 05:52, CD-22 made a second fatal run. This pattern struck even closer, rupturing the main pressure hull in multiple places and opening the control room to flooding. Electrical power failed, emergency lights died, and at roughly 600 feet, well below test depth, the hull began to collapse. Bulkheads crushed and compartments imploded like tin cans. The submarine was gone within 3 minutes of the first depth charge impact. At 06:00, CD-22 and PB-102 reported a confirmed kill as oil, wood fragments and cork floated to the surface. They circled for 2 hours, dropping additional charges to be certain. No survivors were recovered. All 79 men aboard Harder were lost, including Commander Samuel Dealey and radioman Calvin Bull, who had earned a Bronze Star for the June destroyer actions. Every officer and sailor who had made Harder feared across the Pacific. USS Hake remained submerged until nightfall. Her captain filed the contact and loss report that reached Admiral Lockwood at 8 Mac on August 25. Lockwood promptly suspended submarine operations in the Dassault Bay area and ordered all boats to withdraw to safer patrol zones. News of Harder's presumed loss reached the United States in early September. The Navy Department announced her as lost with all hands, but withheld operational details because submarine operations were classified. The American public would not learn the full account of Harder's 5th patrol until after the war, though the Japanese already knew. Admiral Toyota received CD-22's report on August 26th and commended the escort's crew. The submarine that had menaced his destroyer screen for months was finally gone. What Toyota could not grasp was how much damage Day had already inflicted, and how his 4 furious days in June had shifted the strategic picture. The Battle of the Philippine Sea began on June 19, 1944, 9 days after Harder sank her 4th destroyer off Tawi Tawi, when Admiral Ozawa's mobile fleet engaged. Admiral Spruance's 5th fleet in the largest carrier battle to date, 15 American carriers versus 9 Japanese, roughly 900 U.S. aircraft against about 430 Japanese planes. Over 2 days, American aviators shot down 376 Japanese planes, while losing only 30 of their own. The engagement became known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. 3 Japanese carriers, Taiho, Shokaku, and Hio, sank. 2 battleships were damaged, and a cruiser went under. The Imperial Japanese Navy lost roughly 75% of its carrier air groups and never recovered. Historians argue the battle might have had a different outcome if Ozawa had departed on schedule. His original plan had the mobile fleet leave Tawi Tawi on June 15th, which would have given reconnaissance aircraft 4 days to locate the American forces and allowed carriers to sail fully supplied with destroyer screens organized and supply ships in place. Instead, Harder's attacks forced an early departure 6 days ahead of plan. Ozawa reached the Philippine Sea on June 14th, with ships scattered across 200 miles of ocean, reconnaissance planes low on fuel, destroyer screens still reorganizing from anti-submarine duties, and supply vessels days behind. When U.S. carrier aircraft found Ozawa's fleet on June 19th, his carriers were still launching, cap was undermanned, and formations were disordered, circumstances that turned the engagement into a rout. Admiral Lockwood recognized Harder's strategic impact immediately and later called her 5th Patrol the most consequential submarine operation of the Pacific War. 4 destroyers sunk meant 4 fewer escorts for Japanese carriers, and forcing the mobile fleet to depart early collapsed the Japanese plan before the first shots flew. From December 1941 through August 1944, American submarines sank 1,314 enemy ships, totaling about 5.3 million tons, mostly merchant ships, tankers and transports, but only 29 warships. Most submarine skippers avoided warships because they were fast, well-armed and dangerous. Day demonstrated submarines could hunt and destroy surface warships. His down-the-throat approach worked because it violated every assumption Japanese destroyer captains held about submarine behavior. Subs were supposed to flee, not charge. When Harder surged at them, Japanese captains hesitated, often for about 12 seconds, time enough for torpedoes closing at 46 knots to reach their targets. By war's end, American submarines employing DEI's tactics had sunk 214 Japanese warships, including 4 carriers, 1 battleship, 9 cruisers and 38 destroyers, plus numerous escorts and patrol craft. Japan began the war with 63 destroyers and built 49 more during the conflict. U.S. submarines sank 38 of them, Harder accounting for 4 in 4 days. On March 27, 1946, President Harry Truman presented Commander Samuel Dealey's Medal of Honor to his widow Edwina Day on the White House lawn. The citation praised this remarkable record of 5 vital Japanese destroyers sunk in 5 short-range torpedo attacks and DAE's indomitable leadership. A destroyer escort, USS Day, was named for him and commissioned in 1954, serving until 1972. Harder received the Presidential Unit Citation for her first 5 patrols and 6 battle stars for World War II service. Her motto, "Hit 'em harder," became a totem among submariners, but her lasting legacy was tactical. Before Harder's 5th Patrol doctrine stressed stealth and evasion, if a destroyer detected you, you ran deep, rigged for silent running, and prayed the depth charges missed. Engaging destroyers directly was considered suicidal because the math favored the surface ship. Day changed those odds by exploiting one fact about destroyer captains: they expected submarines to flee. A charging sub forced an instant decision with imperfect information. Turn left, turn right, hold course, open fire, all while torpedoes closed. Many captains misjudged the situation. By the time they reacted, the torpedoes had already struck. Between June and December 1944, a dozen American submarines adopted Dealey's aggressive doctrine. USS Tang sank 2 destroyers. USS Trigger sank 1. USS Barb sank 1 and damaged another. USS Flasher sank 3 escorts using down-the-throat attacks. The tactic's raw success rate was about 63%, roughly 3 sinks and 1 damage per 5 attacks, with only 1 failure in 5. The Japanese adapted by late 1944, developing counters. When a sub charged, they would turn away and circle back to force the submarine to present a broadside to other ships' torpedoes, or slow deliberately to let the torpedoes pass and attempt to ram. The tactic still worked, but success rates dipped to about 40%, and U.S. submarine losses rose. From August to December 1944, 9 submarines were lost to destroyer action. Tang was lost on October 24th, when one of her own torpedoes turned back and struck her. and Harder went down on August 24th. Darter ran aground on October 23rd while pursuing a destroyer. Even with higher losses, submarines were sinking enemy shipping at unprecedented rates. Admiral Lockwood faced a stark choice: recall the boats and return to defensive doctrine, or accept heavier casualties to annihilate Japan's convoy system. He chose aggression. From January through August 1945, submarines operating under aggressive patrol rules sank 437 Japanese merchant ships and 53 warships. By August, Japan retained less than 25% of the merchant tonnage she had at the war's start. The home islands were starving. Factories stopped for lack of raw materials, and the IJN could not fuel its remaining vessels. Day never witnessed the full effects of his tactics. He died 3 months after his greatest triumph, killed by the very sort of escort he had spent a year learning to defeat. His methods, however, endured. Every submarine commander studied Harder's patrols and incorporated the down-the-throat doctrine into planning and torpedo solutions. On May 22, 2024, 80 years after she sank, an exploration team led by Tim Taylor and the Lost 52 project located Harder's wreck in the South China Sea. She rests upright on the seabed at about 3,650 feet, roughly 12 miles west of Dassault Bay, where she made her final dive. The pressure hull hole remains largely intact, aside from depth charge damage near the conning tower. The wreck is a protected war grave and off-limits to salvage, but finding Harder delivered long-awaited closure to families and honored the 79 men who altered naval warfare. Harder's story lives on in unexpected places. At the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, instructors still use the down-the-throat attack as a case study in offensive doctrine, not because modern wire-guided torpedoes require close-range attacks, but because Day's approach illustrates a broader principle. When an enemy expects you to flee, striking forward can be decisive. The Naval History and Heritage Command preserves Harder's full patrol reports, every radio message, torpedo solution, and depth charge encounter, documenting how DE refined his approach across 6 war patrols through relentless learning and adaptation. Commander Day's grave is in Arlington National Cemetery, Section 59, Grave 874. His headstone lists his rank, service dates, and simply Medal of Honor Destroyer Killer. Families of Harder's crew gather each year on August 24th, the day of her sinking, leaving flowers and sharing memories of sons, grandfathers, and brothers who gave their lives at 22, 25, 37, or other ages, men who had volunteered for submarine duty knowing the risks. 22% of World War II submariners died, the highest casualty rate of any U.S. service branch. They served anyway. Calvin Bull, the radio operator who earned a Bronze Star for June's actions, was 24 when he died. John Mao, a survivor who later became an admiral, spent 5 decades keeping the story alive until his death in 2010 at age 90. The last Harder veteran, Paul Bryce, died in 2022 at 98, leaving no living crew members to tell the tale firsthand. That is why preserving these accounts matters. Patrol reports and medals can record events, but cannot fully convey what it felt like to charge a destroyer at flank speed, to have depth charges explode overhead, or to watch a captain weigh choices that meant life or death for everyone aboard. The official tally, 4 destroyers sunk in 4 days, omits the fear, fatigue, and the constant awareness that any patrol might be the last. If this account moved you, please like and subscribe so these forgotten stories reach more people. Share where you're watching from and whether someone in your family served. Every comment helps keep Commander Samuel Day and the 79 men of USS Harder from slipping into silence. They deserve to be remembered,